Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica and I am a Student Health Project Coordinator here at Think Positive. It is my absolute delight to host another live conversation for you this afternoon, where we will be discussing very informally the benefits that we've seen of wider community engagement with our student mental health agreements. So, as I hope you know, Think Positive promotes a holistic approach to student mental health support here in Scotland, and we slightly ambitiously want to discuss how we can take that one community approach from our campuses and expand it further. What would it be like if our one community was Scotland? With no further ado, I'm going to ask each of my companions here to introduce themselves in one sentence, and then I'll come back and I'll open the discussion.
Hi, my name's Emma Roberts. I'm a policy officer at the Scottish Funding Council and I lead on our mental health work.
Hi, I'm Julie Nichol. I work at the University of St Andrews as a part of Student Services.
I'll just jump in then. My name's Susan Docherty and I am the Student President at Glasgow Caledonian University.
Hi, I'm Matt Crowley. I'm the President of the National Union of Students in Scotland.
Hi, I'm Miriam. I'm the Scottish Coordinator for Nightlines and I am an alumni of St Andrews University and I was a Nightline volunteer for 5 years there.
Hi, I'm Molly Greasley. I'm the Think Positive Project Manager at NUS Scotland.
Hi there, I'm Lynn Pilkington. I work at Stigma, Scotland's national programmes in mental health, stigma and discrimination.
Hi, I'm Robert Stevenson. I work with the Scottish Recovery Network and we're the national organisation that promotes the fact that people can and do recover from mental health problems.
Hi, I'm Stephen Paxton and I work in the Advanced Learning and Science Division at the Scottish Government. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. As a way of introduction to this conversation, I wonder if it's best to reflect initially on the benefits that we've seen in our own work from engaging with the student mental health agreements, which I then hope is going to expand organically into an exploration of the wider benefits of our agreements and what we can learn from the wider sector at large. Would anyone like to begin?
I'm happy to go first, Jess.
Go on, Susan.
So I've seen quite a lot of benefits. I would say the benefits have been the collaboration between the Students' Association and the university working in partnership on the mental health initiatives when we're creating, implementing, coordinating the agreement. So that's been really beneficial. Between us, we were able to map the current provision of services and look at trends and discuss issues with Glasgow Caledonian University students and the staff that affected them, as well as collaborating and consulting with student and university representatives. I would say then we evaluating the data, the overall aim is ensuring that good mental health wellbeing was achievable for the students at GCU, and doing that together with putting the student mental health agreement in place, collated everything that the institution as well as student association and the students wanted to improve student mental ill health in one clear, easy to read document, which meant you could focus on a variety of topics, could assess areas to prioritise, then work on improvements to positively impact the staff and the student experience.
That's smashing, thank you. And what a great, actually, explanation of what a student mental health agreement is. That's fantastic.
At St Andrews, we kind of found it was helpful for accountability, so we could have each team kind of be accountable for certain projects and make sure that staff members in different departments were linking up and having a wider conversation with colleagues that may not have been actively involved, becoming more involved in projects that we were having. We sort of looked at best practice in other universities and even what other departments were doing, and sort of tried to showcase that and expand it out into the wider into the wider university. It was also really good to get student engagement. We had really good links with the Students' Union and having them feedback and join in and again showcase what they were doing, and it provided a cohesive document to then present to students to say, hey, this is what we're doing. We really care and we want you to be involved with what we're doing. So that's why we kind of seen that's the benefits that we kind of found from participating in it this year, and we're really excited. We're already beginning planning for next year.
You know, that's definitely what we want to hear. That's fantastic. And I suppose also thinking from a wider sector perspective, you know, I'm really aware we've just, so today is the Kickstart. This is our Refreshers event. You know, we're restarting the new project cycle. That's really exciting. But we're also looking from a project team perspective of, you know, how do we continue and evolve our support as these agreements evolve, as we have more participants. And one of the things that we've been really looking at in our weekly forums is bringing in, you know, the wider sector, funny enough here today, and different external organisations and what support we can look for there, but also kind of sharing those resources, sharing that learning. So we were hoping to be joined by City of Glasgow College today, and I know that they've done quite a lot of work with Brothers in Arms. And it was really interesting in their end of year report. One of the things that they were talking about was that, so they'd brought Brothers in Arms as an organisation onto campus, specifically targeted towards their students who study construction. So perhaps looking at a particular group that they might not have had such high engagement with before. They might have done, they might not. And they actually saw higher app downloads of the Brother in Arms app when they were present on campus. So I wonder from, not to put you on the spot, Robert, but from perhaps from another external perspective, if there's seen benefits from external organisations at being able to interact with institutions and student associations through the Think Positive network, and through the student mental health agreements framework that perhaps might not have been there otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. I mean, I was reflecting on that recently, and the period that we've come through, students in particular may have been spending less time on campus, more time in the community, whether it's their home community or their college or university community. I was just wondering if there is scope for going forward to adopt that old saying about linking town and gown, and actually widening these agreements out to not just include institutions and student bodies, but also the wider community in terms of maybe local community councils, local government, and also the wider third sector.
I was going to just pop in there as well. I think that's really valuable, Robert, because then we do look at communities, and like it has changed those geographical communities and the communities of interest. In my background, I've done a bit of student engagement. So I just moved position from City of Glasgow College. So it's funny that you mentioned them. So I'll champion them a bit. But and that was my experience of working with mental health agreements. For I suppose as at CME, you mentioned there was quite a lot of talk there about getting students involved in things. And for us, that's really important. Quite a lot of our youth champions are at university. And I think it's just really important for us to consider where that where stigma fits into that. Because if you are reaching out for people to say, hey, yeah, come get involved in this, something about mental health, well, we know the stigma that exists around that. And people might have had experience of discrimination. So about that, and like you mentioned there, that the groups that we wouldn't necessarily have reached before, whether it's men or different students, they might have other barriers. That we do know that we kind of take that approach where we recognise who's not in the room and who can't. And if we don't tackle stigma, we know that that's a foundational element to everything we do. So if we can say we're doing these things and people can get service, but we know from people who've gone through that transition, when you transition into education, that stigma starts again. How do you make yourself known to services?
Can I come in there? Is that all right? I sort of agree with Lynn. I think that I think it does destigmatize. I can't say that word. Sorry.
Stigma down.
I can never say that. I think that there's many positives to engage with the wider community and society, including destigmatising mental health struggles, providing support within the communities. So while you're at university and beyond, so you know that takes it into the world of employment, and I think it helps to reinforce students that have got mental health challenges. And it's maybe to leave behind like the old models, you know, that are probably not sufficient, like of old, you know, so it allows engagement productively and contributing to our communities in many different ways. So I think that by, you know, as working in collaboration with going out into the wider community, I think it benefits everybody in the long run.
Yeah, I think so. On you go, Miriam.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I was going to say, in terms of the engaging with the wider community and also breaking down stigma, I think Nightline as a student-led initiative is something that does both of those things, because you've got students kind of working every single night to support their peers. And so they kind of hear on the phone and over instant messaging and emails exactly what their peers are going through, and so they're able to kind of understand, and they're able to reduce that stigma just generally in the community, because they understand and they're helping each other, and it does kind of bring the community together once you know what other students are going through. I think a lot of students choose to volunteer for Nightline because they have potentially had experience with getting support with their mental health in the past, but others just kind of go to it because they think it seems like a really interesting way and a beneficial way to spend their time, and it's a really good way of kind of educating the community and bringing it together.
Yeah. Just to follow on from that, two things were mentioned. Stephen Paxton, Scottish Government. Two things were mentioned that were very important there. First of all, volunteering, and secondly, the third sector. And I think there's a very strong possibility of building relationships with the third sector to facilitate volunteering as a way of helping, in a way of addressing some of the issues we're tackling. I think volunteering is vitally important. I think the relationship to the third sector is vitally important as well. I know from a Scottish Government perspective, resources are put into the third sector a lot, so it's important that we connect these things together. So the student health, mental health agreements, the work and wellbeing and mental health, along with what we're doing in the third sector as well, so that we can make those connections. And 2 and 2 we can make 5. We can do more. We can do more with those connections. And the key thing, of course, I think Robert had hinted at it and said it. I think the key thing is relationship, and if we can build those things, then that really is at the heart of the mental health agreements. Thanks.
I think what's really sorry, Matt, I've not spoken. On you go.
I was just going to say, I think it's, it's really necessary for us to have this wider engagement, because I think, for me, I talk about mental health when it comes to students, but students can suffer from poor mental health before they're a student. They can suffer after they're a student. It isn't just a certain period in their life where this will be an issue. And I caught it this morning that under lockdown in Scotland, the number of referrals to child and adolescent mental health support services had fallen by 57%. And it means that Scotland's young people essentially aren't getting that support just now and are suffering as a result of lockdown. And that's kind of before probably they become a student, and likewise after they leave, those issues will remain. So there has to be that wider societal engagement, wider community engagement. But when we're talking about communities as well, I think it's also important to realise that students aren't just a monolithic group, and there's communities within students. So one of the really valuable elements of us developing the Student Mental Health Partnership Agreement at Strathclyde was that we were kind of focusing in on individual communities within students too. So we're recognising that there's particular challenges around poor mental health within the LGBT community. So we set aside that within the Mental Health Partnership Agreement to specifically address that too. And I think the wider society engagement and cultural groups, etc., feeding into the work that we're doing is really valuable.
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Matt. Just to kind of follow on from that, I just want to pick up on what you're saying about referrals going down. And I think we should be mindful at the moment that, I mean, obviously they will be going back, but students aren't on campus at the moment, and going forward they might not be on campus as much as they used to be. And you know, I have heard from the sector that students don't always remember that they're able to engage with these services in the same way, even though they're not present physically. So having those links into the wider community, because if people are having issues and they're not engaging with their institutions, then that information is lost. We don't know if they're seeking help from their community, or if they're not, or if they don't know where to go. So I think those connections are really important, especially at the moment. And as you say as well, with the specialist groups, we know there are groups that are vulnerable, kind of care experienced, and as you said, LGBT, or kind of ethnic minorities that may have difficulty accessing services, and it's making sure we've got those connections so that there's specialist support available, because, you know, best will in the world, the wellbeing services that are present in colleges and universities might not have that specialist knowledge to help certain groups, or a kind of variety of staff that people feel comfortable engaging with. So I think it's really important to have that specialist support within the community.
I was just going to say as well, in terms of what you were just saying there about kind of students not being on campus, that was something that we were kind of working with at Nightline, is that a lot of Nightlines, in fact most of them that I worked with, decided to extend their services after the lockdown, and kind of try and carry on offering a service throughout. Well, at St Andrews they did it all through June, and a lot of places did, but the problem that we had was that, yeah, people weren't on campus and they weren't at university, so they just didn't think to contact us. So even though we were there, we didn't actually get as many calls, which was quite frustrating, because you saw statistics from Samaritans and things saying that they'd got huge amounts of calls, and we were kind of like, we want to take the calls, but they're just not coming. So yeah, I think definitely like partnerships would really help with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to pick up on the last two couple of points. Certainly in the sort of wider community, what we know when we talk to people about what helps them in terms of recovering from mental health problems is the importance that they place on peer support, and almost to the extent where peer support is as important, if not more important, than support from formal or statutory services. And that's certainly been the case during the lockdown period, where, as Emma says, a lot of services have been scaled back, or have not been, people have not been able to access them in the traditional way. What we have found in speaking to people is peer support has become even more important during this period. And as Miriam has touched on, a lot of peer support has, particularly in the third sector, has been very responsive and flexible in terms of using remote ways of contacting with people, whether that's telephone contact, whether it's using WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, or, dare I say it, the dreaded Zoom. And there is a lot of peer support available out there online. And one of the things that I've certainly heard speaking to people is people quite like it. They like being able to participate, and it means you can actually access that support from wherever you are. So, I mean, I talk to people who are maybe based in Thurso who access peer support groups in Glasgow, just simply because it's now being provided remotely. And the sort of final point I'd make is that in terms of peer support within the student body, one of the things that the Scottish Recovery Network has is a resource, which is called peer-to-peer, and it's a set of learning materials. And we've certainly used it in a couple of campuses to support student organisations who are interested in developing their skills as peer supporters. And that's certainly something we'd be keen to promote on a wider basis across campuses and throughout Scotland.
I know at St Andrews we've been doing a lot of work around engaging staff and students in sort of sharing their stories of recovery, to kind of, again, emphasize to students that when you go into a job, that, you know, there is support, and but mental health doesn't go away when you stop studying, which I'm sure everyone is aware of, but it's to almost normalize that culture that in academia, in further education or in further jobs, that there are people that are still there, and that sort of peer support network that you touched on and Nightline are key sort of areas that people can utilize and get that support from, because I think there is sometimes that worry that students, when they leave the bubble of university, I know St Andrews is described as the bubble, that there isn't going to be that support, but actually there's so many different places that are offering support for a huge variety of mental health difficulties. I think as a university, us linking up with that and showcasing all of these different support networks can really say to students, hey, when you leave, here's people that can also support you, like hopefully we have during your time here.
That was, yeah, earlier on, that's what I was going to kind of touch on as well, like those further movements through the lifespan. Definitely, it's so important. And we've got tools and resources and things on our website, but I think we need to recognise that students themselves become the biggest champions themselves when they go out into communities, and you can expect a level of normalisation. Well, we had a mental health agreement, surely we should be putting in place stuff, surely where is this? And if they don't have that, then we're creating a lot of curious learners that when they do move into whether further education or whether it's into employment or whatever destination, they'll be thinking, where is this? Is there something missing? And for me, that's really important, because by being able to talk about it yourself, you look for that normalization. You look for everyone to be kind of talking about it. And just touching on what you're saying there, that's a model which definitely we have followed in our skills-based approach. We'd be looking at the full institution where peer-led model where students can help students, staff help staff, and recognizing that. So definitely, not forgetting staff in amongst all of it as well.
Yeah, I think that the same goes with like sort of student associations. You know, if we like the wider engagement with the sector and work in collaboration with other student associations and the higher sector as a whole, would help us share like best practice. We could upskill, you know, ideas, benchmark with other universities. You know, I think that would benefit wider sort of student engagement. You know, with more knowledge and skills that they would then share amongst their peers and take with them into local communities and into employment. You know, and which increases employability support as well. So if you're, you know, got all this knowledge and you're going into as a new graduate, you know, you've got all this knowledge to take with you that you can sort of feed in, you know, to that employment. So it benefits employers as well, because the graduates will be able to provide, you know, that clear, concise information that they've sort of learnt through university.
I was also going to say that kind of looking back at we were talking about volunteering earlier and about how students that have volunteered at university moving into being a graduate and opportunities for them to kind of continue volunteering in other charities. I know at St Andrews Nightline we had quite a close partnership with the Samaritans for a while, especially the Samaritans in Kirkcaldy, which is close by, and we were kind of hoping to get a partnership where you could, with your St Andrews Nightline training, you could move into being a Samaritans volunteer without kind of starting from the beginning with the Samaritans training, because as a student volunteer, you've got so much knowledge and so much experience, and it would be really great if we could encourage further volunteering after graduating and like kind of share the knowledge.
Definitely.
That sounds like a great initiative.
And I wonder as well, there's something about that further community sharing. That isn't there, you know, that you've taken the knowledge and experience that you've gained during either your higher or further education, and taking that out into the wider community. So that is, I suppose, fitting that holistic one Scotland, one community narrative or approach that we'd really like to be moving towards. And I wonder as well, Susan, I really appreciated your perspective on, you know, if we can share it through universities and we can share this best practice, particularly through student associations. And I just want to flag as well that, you know, the importance of sharing it with colleges and college essays. And I know that, so I have to put a disclaimer that as Think Positive, and we are funded by the government. We don't lobby. We are separate from NUS in this perspective. But I know that one of the things that NUS was looking at last year was particularly the parity of mental health support for students, no matter whether you go to higher education or further education in Scotland. And one of the ideas behind that is the Think Positive project, but there are lots of other ways by working together and sort of expanding the network, but bringing in more people and more ideas, that hopefully that's also something that we can be thinking about or learning from, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I'll possibly come in at that stage then. I think that's it. We are, you know, I think there's been a really positive government engagement in the sector. You know, the commitment of £20 million for counsellors at colleges and unis across Scotland was incredibly vital, and you know, that kind of came, you know, originally with the guarantee of at least one FTE counsellor on every campus. And many colleges coming into that didn't have a single FTE counsellor on their campus, and it was incredibly valuable. But there is still that inequity built into the system, and the funding, you know, in the first wave of funding, it kind of was equally distributed. And I guess from a NUS point of view, we want it to be distributed in a more equitable basis of you know, redressing the balances which currently exist. And I think once we start to address those balances, and particularly in colleges, I think that's then where things like the upskilling is really important, and the you know, delving into, you know, some of the things we were doing at Strathclyde, like the mental health first aid training, bringing in all of our clubs and societies and the keenest student volunteers and student leaders, and training them in mental health first aid, and those things were incredibly valuable. But I think there's still a way to go with colleges, but I think the funding being there is really positive, and I think, you know, I think we're on the road to building success there.
Yeah, can I just pick up on the point about colleges? I think colleges are vitally important, and I think, if anything, the link between the college and the community is even more important there, because as you know, most of the students in college sector will be part-time and will not be on campus as often as, you know, maybe students at university. I also think there is a need for strong links between community groups to support particular groups within the community. Someone mentioned young men earlier on, and I think particularly young men studying STEM subjects in the construction trade, where we know suicide rates are particularly high. I think linking them with the sector, but also with the wider community is the way to provide support to those particular vulnerable groups who perhaps wouldn't engage within the actual college structures, but might engage within a wider community or industrial setting.
I think that's a really important point, Robert, and I'm thinking, you know, college students are, like what you said, like quite a lot of them are part-time anyway, and you know, if you look at things like the apprentices who often do their apprenticeship through college, you know, we just saw in the last couple of weeks, the National Society of Apprentices released figures that, you know, more than half of apprentices right now are struggling with their mental health. And I think your point about wider community support initiatives and support being available is incredibly vital, because, you know, apprentices will very, very, very infrequently be on their campus and might not even have access to that support. So I think that's really important.
And just to pick up on that as well, like there's the so I suppose as apprentices as well, you'll be working in workplaces and in education settings, and what we do is we kind of focus on kind of 4 key areas where we do see stigma and discrimination being most prevalent, being education, workplace and communities are 3 of those areas. I think that's all about, but we did research earlier on in the year, and I think the place people most frequently did experience stigma and discrimination was from their friends and their family as well. And I think it's interesting how we can open up sometimes in whether it is in our education settings, but then we can't have those conversations elsewhere. And for me, whether that's communities, apprentices, everyone, it's for us opening up that conversation, and no matter where you are, always being able to have that conversation, and not specifically being a mental health first aider, but if someone's not okay, being able to share that, whether on campus, in your community, working from home, all across those settings. And like you were saying, Jess, it's like if we are looking at a wider community, Scotland wide, then that is a big ask for everyone to take part in, to look out for each other.
I think as well, starting at colleges, you've got your articulation students straight into university. You want that to sort of flow into line, with the community, so that they're getting that, the support from college straight through up to university, straight into the workplace. You want it to flow through, every sort of aspect of your life.
I think we get a lot of students who come from direct entrance, so straight into second year. There's almost can be that expectation and pressure of you're in your second year of university, you should know all this. And I think it's giving students like that, and also, as you said, students who are coming from college who will be going into second or third year, a bit of space and a resource to say, here's all the support that's available for you at the university, here's all the support that's available to you more widely that the university can help you access, because it is good to target things at first years, because that's probably the majority of the cohort for a lot of institutions, but we need to remember all these different students who are coming from very different backgrounds.
Yeah, I agree.
Just a quick one as well, just listening, very interested in the conversation. Also to remember that the role international students will have with campuses, especially now as we're moving into the new academic term. International students coming here, perhaps there's a lot of issues there we need to start to bear in mind. That's another useful thing we should think about in terms of student mental health agreements, and the experiences that they bring and the expertise that they bring, but also perhaps some of the networks that they belong to locally as well, which can also be a resource for us. We talked about other groups, we talked about LGBTQI groups, but there's also faith community groups as well that we could link into. So I think the key in this is actually those types of relationships locally and reaching out and bringing those relationships into campus in a sense. I think that was one of the phrases that was used. I think that's a very attractive thing to do and a very helpful thing to do, and particularly in terms of the colleges as well, in terms of apprentices and the wider networks that they're representative of. So it's just also just to put in that marker about international students, and that number changes from institution to institution, but we do have significant numbers of international students, and it's to also to include them in that. Thanks. I'll just mute my mic just now.
And can I just jump in that as well about the international students? I think what we do at GCU is obviously it's not a one size fits all. A lot of international students will not access the mental health facilities or resources that we've got. So it's a case of sort of reaching out in different ways to different communities, as they need, because obviously there's a bit of a stigma there, for mental health, which we found from a lot of international students, and we're sort of, try to chip away at that and sort of have a different tact, to go in to try and get them to access the services that are there. So I think we sort of need to bear that in mind when we're dealing with sort of different types of communities.
I mean, I'd probably come back to peer support there. I mean, I would say, people might not be prepared to access mainstream services, but they might be prepared to support each other within their own peer community, and it's perhaps that we should support and encourage. Can I just make one final point on that? I mean, I've been really encouraged throughout the lockdown period of how local communities at a geographical level responded and supported each other, often without being asked. I just fear somehow that people might say, right, thank you very much, the crisis is over, it's now back over to mainstream services to provide. And I think that there's something similar on our colleges and university campuses, where I've had some difficult conversations with university staff, counselling staff, about peer support, because they see it as being unregulated, that there's risks associated with it, it's not a professional counselling service. And I think we need to challenge some of those attitudes if we're going to really harness the expertise there is within the student body for peers to support each other.
I would say as well, as we go into the new semester, things are going to change so much in terms of how much physical face-to-face contact students are going to be able to have with each other, and especially speaking about international students, some of them I know won't even be coming back in September. They'll be studying remotely, and I think that peer support is so important to kind of establish for those remote relationships as well, because it's not so easy to meet friends on your own if you're, you know, halfway across the world. So I think that, yeah, university bodies and organisations will have a good job to do in terms of connecting people with the other peers so that they can support each other from a distance. That'll be really important.
I think that goes back to the, you know, that we're talking about sort of engaging with services, you know, like I think if we all work together and see what services, resources or initiatives work well and sort of amongst us all as a community, and then we can sort of address resources that are maybe no longer required or what provisions are limited, and if we can share them, and it allows us all to address and develop strategies to address, you know, any identified gaps, especially in like respect to services, you know, if we work amongst us.
Yeah. And I think just as we're talking there, as we're thinking about student mental health agreements, perhaps that international, that connectedness, that use of technology that we've talked about, indeed we're all sitting here on screen at the moment, maybe that's something we should think about including as these student mental health agreements evolve, that we are reaching out not just to a geographic community within a 5-mile radius of an institution, but frequently now globally, in terms of the challenges we all face. Thanks.
Yeah.
Gosh, Stephen, I hope that's not meaning that we've got to go from this one community of aiming for Scotland that we're now going one community we're going to aim for the world.
Why not?
Just being aware that we've got a lot of people who do who are studying with us now. I take the point that my colleague Miriam raised, that some people won't be coming back in September, but they will be engaging with the university and engaging with education, but they might be in another part of the world. So it's just to bear all these things in mind as we move forward. I think that the whole pandemic has kind of restructured a lot of our thinking and maybe opened up ways of thinking that weren't there before. So there's quite a lot to explore. Thanks.
And absolutely, not just the international students. I think one of the ones we're really going to have to think about are new students now entering their first year this September, where it's not going to be the usual Freshers Week, I wouldn't anticipate, and they don't have that peer support network that they already made in previous study years to fall back on. So it's really about how do we create that peer network and that community of support with new students that don't have existing friends or relationships with tutors within their institution. So I think that's going to be quite important for this year's mental health agreements.
I would just echo that. Yeah. Thanks, Emma.
That's brilliant. I'm really sorry to say that we've come to the end of our time today. But I just desperately want to thank everybody for joining us, particularly in this conversation, but I appreciate also throughout the day if you've been able to catch any of the rest of our Refreshers event. I know that I speak for the whole Think Positive team when I say how excited we are to see how these discussions continue to evolve. Particularly, you know, as we're launching with our new project cycle today, as I've said. So big news, instead of being a 12-month project cycle, we are now moving into an 18-month project cycle and looking at this whole community approach, be that Scotland, be that the world, and how do we continue to host these spaces, but also persist with these developments. You know, I really, I think one of the things that personally I will be taking most away from today is this idea that mental health exists beyond the bubble. It exists beyond college and university campuses. It exists in our communities. It exists in our families, in all of our relationships, no matter where we are, what country, or and how do we as the project, we as the network, we as individuals, but equally as a collective, come together to offer the support that we all want to. So we will be continuing these discussions in our weekly forums and on our Slack workspace. We're delighted that will be continuing no matter what happens next with lockdown. They've been brilliant, and we really encourage anybody who's interested to contact us. So please get hold of us on social media or at our email address, which is thinkpositive@nus-scotland.org.uk, and come and join us, because we just want, this needs to keep going. And we very much hope to see you soon. Hurrah for now.
Okay, bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.